As many of you know, I grew up in a Christian home with a dad who was a minister and a mom who is now a children's minister. And so going to church was never an option. When the doors were open, you were there. And the rule was, if you go to church on Sunday morning, you got to eat lunch. And so I was there every Sunday morning. And I remember one Saturday night, I decided to stay out late with my friends, and I thought, well, I go to church every Sunday. I go on Wednesday nights. I think I'll just sleep in on Sunday morning. And I kid you not, my mom didn't talk to me for 3 days, and I know I didn't eat lunch that day. So church was not an option. And they tell you when you start growing up in the church that as soon as you become a Christian, everything's going to be smooth sailing. And I have a picture here of what you think you're getting into, and then what God's plan really is for you. And I can tell you right now, if you see the flags on the bottom, I'm probably at the third flag. When you become a Christian, you think everything's going to be smooth, but that's not always the case. And when I was a junior in high school, things started to change for me. I started to make some poor choices and put myself in places that I probably shouldn't have been in. I made some relationships that were hurtful, and I was emotionally abused by some people. I realized I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. Now, I lived at home with my dad for a long time, and he was a great dad, but it only felt like having half a dad, because the only thing I would ever get is, hey, how are you? What'd you learn at school today? Nothing more. And I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and so at some point in this, I may have to stop for a second, but it was hard having a dad who didn't show his love in that way. As a freshman in college, I hit my breaking point. I cut off relationships with some people. My roommate was no longer in college. I lived alone, and there were many nights when I cried myself to sleep. I even put on a good show here at church, so no one knew how I was really feeling. I put on such a good show that you all elected me to be the Christian education director. I was good at hiding how I felt. And it got worse and worse until one day I'd had enough. And I drove out to a remote road. And I picked this road intentionally because I knew there were winds and bends in this road, and there were lots of bumps. And I sped up in my car. Closed my eyes and I took my hands off the wheel, hoping that I would go off the road. However, my car stayed on the road that day, and it didn't hit a bump and went around every one of those curves. And I truly believe that God took control of my car that night, and it was a miracle that I survived. Now, after that incredible miracle, I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to get some help. And I went to my mom. Now, many of you know my mom. And her first go-to reaction if anything's wrong is you got to check your pulse, got to check your blood pressure. Are you coughing? Are you feeling all right? I mean, it's, if I get a hangnail, that's where we're going. And I told her, I said, I think I need some help. And she goes, oh, you'll be fine. You'll get another roommate. You'll get new friends. It'll be all right. And I said, no, I think I need to get some help. And I told her that I had been thinking about doing what I did in the car. I didn't tell her I had done it because I didn't want to see the reaction on her face. And so she goes, well, I have a friend and you can go talk to him, and I got stable. After that, I felt this tug. Now, at this point, I didn't want to talk to God. I sure didn't trust God anymore. There was no praying. There was no going to church. There was not a lot of anything going on, but I felt this tug that I needed to fill the space I had. And so I met up with this guy named Dave Doles. And he said, why don't you come to campus ministry at the Fuel Shack? And I started going, and I only went just so that I had something to do on Wednesday nights. I didn't really go expecting anything because I didn't really care, and I didn't think that God cared. I mean, why would he do those things to me? But I can remember one night when I got there, and I am the kind of person that does not like Christian videos. If you tell me we're going to watch a Numa video tonight, I'm leaving. I didn't like it. And he goes, we're going to watch a Louis Giglio video tonight. And I remember in that Louis Giglio video, he talked about how great our God was. And the video for the first time put it in words that I could understand. It gave me goosebumps and a feeling that I'd never had before. And he said in that video that when you get in those hard times, you need to focus on the cross. Because at the cross, there are three truths when you focus on the cross. The first truth is that at the cross, we see that God loves us. Now, most of us, when you get into a hardship, think, God must not love me if he's letting all these things happen to me. Why would he put me through all this? But if we get right up close to the cross and we look at that cross, you see that he gave his only son to die on that cross for us. And I teach second grade, and I cannot imagine if one of my 21 kids, even though they are a pain some days, I can't imagine losing one of them. But he gave his one and only son. And that showed me that somebody did love me. Now, I know my parents loved me and my family loved me and all that, but I needed to see somebody else love me. The second truth that you see at the cross is probably the hardest one, but God allows freedom, but he maintains control. Now, that's a hard thing to think about and a hard thing to show. So let's go back, if we were on Good Friday, the day that they crucified Jesus. And if you look at that, men were the people who crucified Jesus. That was their job. They had the free will to do that job. God didn't play mind tricks, you see, because they were given a choice. People were given a choice. Well, do you want to free Barabbas, who's this terrible criminal, or do you want to free Jesus, who really hasn't done anything? Now, they chose to free Barabbas, and God didn't change their mouths as they went to say Jesus. He forced them to say Barabbas. No, he let them have free will and free choice. But knowing what we know now, we know that he was in control. And the third truth, and maybe the most powerful one, is that he can take the worst and he can use it for eternal good. Now let's go back to the day that Jesus died again, and if you were following Jesus and listening to the things he had been telling you, what would you think the day that Jesus died? You'd think, well, this guy is a joke. He's been lying. He's been telling all this fake stuff to us. Everything he's been saying is untrue. This is the worst possible thing that could happen. But let's move forward to where we are today, and he used that worst possible thing for everyone in this room's eternal good. I was a part of those awful events. But I firmly believe and trust God put me through those things for eternal good. And I made that choice that night to get in that car. That was my free will choice, but I firmly believe that he was in control. So I started to trust God a little bit more through these videos. I wasn't talking to him yet. I wasn't praying yet, but I started to go back to church. I started to believe things again. And because of that, I listened to God, and I went to work at Green Lake, Wisconsin at the youth camp called Quest, which your youth went to. And I'm very much a homebody. I like my own bed, my family. I like being at home. That is what I like. And so going to Wisconsin for the entire summer was very hard. But I felt like I needed to do it. And through going to that, I started to talk to God again. Now, I wasn't perfect. I still am not perfect, and none of us will be. And I still had made poor choices. But I started to talk to God. And I forgave those people who were emotionally abusive to me. I forgave things. And I decided when I got home, I was going to talk to my dad, and I was going to fix that. So when I got home, I did talk to my dad. And I realized that my dad does love me. He just shows it in a different way, and that's okay. And through that experience, I came home and I became the youth minister at Sullivan First Baptist Church. And a lot of good things happened through there. And that was what I thought God had the plan for me. He put me through that worst thing. Oh, so I thought the worst thing. And he was using me for eternal good at Sullivan First Baptist Church. Now, that whole part of my life was a miracle. But March 2013 rolled around, and he put me through the real trust test. I feel like God said, Jonathan, you need to trust me no matter what, and you're not quite there yet. I was playing basketball with some of my friends like I did every Monday, and I played basketball with the girls' basketball team because I coached with Mike Allen, and I didn't think anything was going to go wrong, and one of my friends got hurt that night, and they thought, because we all like to give each other a hard time, that I was just making fun of them when I collapsed on the floor and started rolling around. But I had actually had a seizure that night. And my friends called 911. And I remember about 10 seconds on the ambulance, a guy asked me, Jonathan, are you with me? Are you okay? And the next thing I know, hours later, I woke up in a hospital room surrounded by my parents and a few doctors. After many tests and every scan you could possibly think about, a PET scan, a CAT scan, a CT scan, they discovered a tumor in my brain. And for the first time, I decided to fully put my trust in God and stay in Terre Haute. I received about 20 emails that first week when they found out I was in the hospital that said I needed to go somewhere else and find a second opinion in Indianapolis. I was told if you stay in Terre Haute, that doctor is probably going to kill you with the treatments he's going to give you. But I said I'm going to stay in Terre Haute. This is where my family is, and this is where my prayer support was. A week later, after that Monday, I had brain surgery, and several weeks later, they came back and told me that they hadn't gotten it all out, that there was still some up there. And I don't know how much you know about cancer, but there are 4 stages of cancer. And you can have anywhere from a 0 to a 4. And if you're at a 4, you better get your things in order. If you're at a 3, you might have a couple months. If you're at a 2, you have years. And if you're at a 1, they think they can cure it. And I was at a 1.8. And so I was that close to only having years. And they said, by that point, something else will get you. And so they said, well, we'll treat it with chemo and radiation, and I am still on chemo to this day, and I could be on chemo for the rest of my life. So, got going on that, and June came around. Feeling a little better, except for I had these bad headaches, and the doctor told my mom, if he has a temperature, you need to get him back to the hospital. Something is wrong. And sure enough, 99 came around, and my mom checked my heart rate, my blood pressure, same routine, and I had a temperature, so off to the hospital again. This time at the hospital, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They stopped my chemo, they stopped my radiation, and they said, something's wrong. They called the infectious disease doctor in, and they found out that I had bacterial meningitis. And I had to have a PICC line put into my arm, and it went about 18 inches into my arm. And I had home treatment. A very serious disease that a lot of people die from, but I got those treatments at home. They pulled out the PICC line, and I was back to normal. Except for steroids are a nasty thing. And my left leg wasn't working right. I couldn't feel it. It was like it was asleep all the time. And they said, oh, well, that's neuropathy. It's from your first surgery. It'll go away. You'll be fine. Well, it didn't go away. And one night, I had a hard time breathing. And my mom came down and did their usual routine. And we called the hospital. And they came and got me. And we went to the ER. And my chest was still hurting. They said, they took a CT scan. They said, well, usually pneumonia shows up and you'll be good. But nothing showed up, but we're pretty sure that's pneumonia. The doctor didn't even touch me. He goes, we'll put you in the hospital, we'll put you on medicine, you'll go home in a couple days. Except for another miracle was about to happen. I didn't have pneumonia. And one day in the hospital, my shoulder started to hurt. And I couldn't breathe, and my chest started to tighten up. And as I'm gasping for air, I asked my mom, I said, what shoulder is it that hurts when you have a heart attack? Because I think I'm having one. I didn't have pneumonia. I had a blood clot in my left leg that I had thrown to my lung, and I had a pulmonary embolism. The doctor came in, and when I asked for help from a doctor, that usually means something serious is happening. And they said that they could not believe that I survived it, and they had lost people in the hospital that day from pulmonary embolisms. So I was in the hospital for 8 days, and the second time I was in the hospital, I was for 23 days. So I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I know what my mom's going through now. I will say that I told myself I was not going to cry through this. Most of the time I would, but I told myself if I stay strong and I don't cry, then I know my parents can do it, and I know my family can do it. I had a scan shortly after all of that happened in August, and it said the tumor was gone. There was nothing left. And they told me as bad as that meningitis was that almost killed me, and the terrible things that I went through in the hospital probably helped eat away at the rest of that tumor. And I have been back, and as of right now, I am cancer-free. And it is because, thank you. It is because God saved me, and I trusted Him to do that for me. The verse that you read earlier was Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And to this day, there is not a day when I don't wear my bracelet, my necklace, or I see and feel the scars on my head and on my body to remind me of what He did for me. And the Message Bible says, whatever I have, wherever I am, I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. So you all are probably wondering, well, that's great you have scars, that's great you have a bracelet, and that's great you have a necklace to wear to remind you. But how can I know that God's with me all the time? How can I know to trust Him no matter what? And in that very first Louis Giglio video, he talked of a little protein molecule called laminin. And if you don't know what laminin is, there's a picture of laminin. And laminin is like the rebar when they build a building. They put it in the cement to hold the cement together. Without that rebar, without laminin, you wouldn't be held together. And here's a real laminin molecule. And there are hundreds and hundreds of tiny crosses all over your body holding you together day after day. And if that's not the constant reminder you need, I don't know what is. Would you pray with me? Dear God, I thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross and give us that symbol of hope and trust in you. I pray that even in the worst situations, we can give it all to you and trust you to get us through it. I pray for those who don't trust you to focus on that cross and be willing to trust you even in the worst circumstances. Trust in you and let your will be done. In your name, amen. I'm going to do something a little different this morning. I have some Band-Aids down here with some permanent markers. And a Band-Aid is meant to cover that wound and to help heal your wound. And God is like our big Band-Aid. And you need to trust Him to cover you up and help you heal. The hardest thing for me to do was to thank God for giving me that cancer, for giving me all those terrible things, because I truly believe without those I would not be the man I am today. He took the worst and He used it for eternal good. And I pray that you come down here, if you feel led, grab a Band-Aid, write something on it, lift it up to God, and let Him heal those wounds. Thank you.